The low-light library sat beside the willow-lined pond, where late afternoon light fell in warm, thin slants. Moss grew softly on the shelves. Wooden tables were smooth from many small hands. Jars of powdered berries and glass tubes caught tiny glints like quiet stars. Etta found a map on one table. It was painted with bright little dots that showed the village paths. But the dots were fading. Etta pressed her magnifier close and frowned. Her apron jingled with pencils as she turned the page of her stitched sketchbook. The walking map helped small children learn which ways to walk and where stones and bridges were. If the painted markers vanished, the little ones might not find their path. She called Oren and Biko. Oren arrived with patient steps and careful hands, folding a sunshade he had made before. Biko scampered in, cheeks full of tiny samples and his tail flicking with excitement. They all looked at the pale dots together. "Why do they fade?" Biko asked, dropping a tiny jar on the table. "Let's test," Etta said. She made a small plan. First, they would make colors from the library jars. Powdered berries for red, crushed leaves for green, and thin tea for tan. Then they would paint tiny marks on paper swatches, just like the map. They would put some swatches in the sun and some in the shade, and they would watch. Etta mixed a red with a little water. The berry dust made a sweet smell. She painted a neat dot on a square of paper and labeled it with a tiny sketch in her book. Oren set out 2 flat boards, one for the sunny slants and one to tuck under the willow for shade. Biko ran to fetch a small lid for rain tests and came back with a leaf full of drops. Each swatch was a little experiment. Etta wrote the date, the color, and a guess. "I think the sun will make the red lighter." Oren wrote notes in careful curls. Biko counted how many swatches they had. They left the boards in place and watched. After an hour, the sun swatches looked a little paler. The shade ones stayed bright. Etta drew the change in her book. "Sun makes some colors fade," she said, "but not all of them." On the second day, gray clouds gathered. Rain began to fall lightly. Etta ran to bring in the boards. One of the jars tipped, and a little splash dotted several papers. A green blotted and ran in a way they hadn't expected. The rain washed part of a dot right off the paper. They sat quiet for a moment. The tests were teaching them things they did not guess. Biko's paws twitched with ideas. Oren smoothed his long, careful hands on the table and suggested, "We can plan more tests. Rain and sun both matter. We need to try ways to protect the paint." Etta nodded. They made a new set of swatches. This time, they tried coverings and coatings. Biko found beeswax near the jars. Oren mixed a plant glue from starch and a little boiled sap the way old makers did. Etta drew neat labels. They made 4 kinds of sample: plain paint, paint with wax brushed on, paint sealed with plant glue, and paint with wax, then glue on top. They put some samples in the sun and some under a little paper sunshade Oren built. For rain, they took turns holding a cloth over the boards, while one friend sprinkled water from a lid to make gentle drops. Each time, Etta sketched what she saw and wrote short notes. They counted minutes, watched for running, and tested the color again the next day. The big moment came when they tested the wax and glue together. In the sun, plain paint faded more than waxed paint. Wax helped the colors stay brighter by keeping the water and bits of dust away. Plant glue stopped paint from lifting when drops fell. When they used wax and glue together, the dots stayed almost the same in both sun and rain tests. "Wax keeps water out," Oren said, holding a swatch to the light. "Glue holds the color tight." "So we can tell the map what to wear!" Biko clapped his paws and chattered. Etta turned to her sketchbook. She laid out the pages like a lesson. For each color, they had a small painted square, a note about sun or shade, and the kind of coating that worked best. She drew simple pictures of how to make wax and plant glue, and she sketched the tiny umbrella sunshade Oren had made. They used the best combination on the map. Etta mixed a batch of berry paint and painted the walking dots fresh. They brushed a thin coat of wax, let it cool, and then brushed a little plant glue over the wax. The dots looked soft and whole again. The map seemed to breathe. Before they finished, Etta wrote the steps clearly at the edge of the map and made a folded page that could be opened by little hands. It showed how to make pigments, how to test them in sun and shade, and how to protect them with wax and glue. Oren added careful diagrams. Biko glued a tiny pouch to the map with a sample swatch inside so children could touch and see. When the map was returned to its shelf by the willow pond, the late light made the dots glow steady and warm. Children who came later could follow the painted path, and, if they wondered, they could look at the little page and try the tests themselves. Etta closed her sketchbook and smiled. The town would not lose its path now. The friends had learned to ask, to test, and to write down what they found. Their careful work could be shared and tried again. As the sun sank behind the willows, the three friends sat at the table, counting the small lessons they'd learned, ready to help the next curious child who came in. Asking questions and testing ideas helps us learn how things work. When we write down what we see and share it, others can try the same steps. Working together makes small problems into clear answers.